In 1798, Congress passed the Sedition Act to quiet the Anti-Federalists. This act allowed penalties for anyone who said or published anything false or scandalous against the federal government. In 1861, Lincoln signed the executive order, the writ of habeas corpus, relating to the events in Baltimore, which suspended prisoners' right to be brought before a jury through independent judicial review. In 1863, Congress passed the Habeas Corpus Act, which endorsed Lincoln's decision to deny habeas corpus in 1861. In 1908, the United States Attorney General created a corps of special agents to investigate federal crimes, also known as the FBI. In 1917, Congress passed the Espionage Act that outlawed statements obstructing the war effort and aiding the enemy. Those found guilty were subject to heavy fines and up to 20 years imprisonment.
In 1918, Congress passed the Sedition Act, which prohibited the utterance or publication of anything disloyal, profane, or abusive about the U.S. government or the American flag. Using the full power of the Espionage Act, General A. Mitchell Palmer began the Red Scare, a series of politically motivated raids and prosecutions of those who dissented from government policy.
President Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066 that allowed the military leaders to assign areas that would allow them rights to evacuate any and all people if the area was needed. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, in order to protect American citizens, over 120,000 people of Japanese descent on the Pacific coast were sent to internment camps.
In 2001, Congress passed the Authorization of the Use of Military Force Act. The act resembled a declaration of war. On September 20th of 2001, President George W. Bush formally declared in a joint session of Congress a war on terror. This was the beginning of the Bush administration's policy that treated the 9/11 attacks as acts of war rather than violations of criminal law. On October 1st, President Bush authorized Operation Enduring Freedom, the invasion of Afghanistan with the goal of capturing al-Qaeda's leader, Osama bin Laden. Congress passed the Patriot Act in the wake of 9/11. The key parts of the act require reauthorization in 4 years if the law is to be extended. The new law gave federal agents expanded authority to track the flow of internet and telephone communication.
On November 13th, the President issued a military order on terrorism. The order gave the Secretary of Defense authority to detain anyone who planned or facilitated terrorist acts on the United States. This order meant that suspected terrorists captured in Afghanistan or elsewhere were not criminal worthy of trial but could be detained for the limitless duration of the war on terror. Eventually, over 700 people were detained, most at Guantanamo. In 2002, United States Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba opened Camp X-Ray. The Bush administration asserted that because the naval base was not technically on United States soil, the captives held there were not subject to United States law and did not have access to the rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution or to protection through the United States justice system. In 2004, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the naval base at Guantanamo was not beyond the reach of United States law, that the executive branch lacked the authority to deny captives access to the United States justice system, and that the captives had the right to initiate habeas corpus submissions. Congress passed the Military Commissions Act of 2006, which says, "No court, justice, or judge shall have the jurisdiction to hear or consider an application for a writ of habeas corpus filed by or on behalf of an alien detained by the United States, who has been determined by the United States to have been properly detained as an enemy combat or is awaiting such determination. In the eyes of the United States, aliens are not granted the rights of a free people."
In 2008, U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Bush administration's withholding of habeas corpus at Guantanamo Bay is unconstitutional. In 2009, on January 22nd, newly inaugurated President Obama proudly issued his first 3 executive orders, one of them a directive requiring Guantanamo Bay to be closed within 1 year.
On April 25th, the FISA court gave the FBI unlimited authority to obtain data collected by Verizon. It requires Verizon on an ongoing daily basis to give the National Security Administration information on all telephone calls in its systems. Thus, under the Obama administration, the communication records of millions of U.S. citizens were being collected indiscriminately and in bulk, regardless of whether they are suspected of any wrongdoing.
Since the occurrence of 9/11, airport security has been increased as well as background checks on future potential employees in the workplace. Due to the wars in Afghanistan and more particularly Iraq, there have been new organizations of terrorists found all around the world in places that they hadn't existed before September 11th. This is a quote from President Barack Obama in the speech to the nation describing his plan to wipe out the terrorist group called ISIS. Due to the U.S. starting 2 different wars, both the Iraq and Afghanistan war, the Middle East is more hostile towards the U.S. than it has ever been before. Since 9/11, the most significant terrorist attack on the U.S. was the Boston Marathon bombing in April of 2013. Russian-born brothers detonated pressure cooker bombs at the finish line of the marathon. No one saw this coming. The Bill of Rights grants American citizens their civil liberties and civil rights. Examples of these are the right to fair public trial, the right to privacy and freedom, the freedom to arbitrary and indefinite detention, the freedom from cruel and abusive treatment and punishment, including so-called alternative interrogation techniques, the freedom of speech and assembly, including the right to dissent without fear of government spying or intimidation, freedom from discriminatory treatment based on race, religion, ethnicity, national origin, gender, or political beliefs, and the right to freedom of religion. Although some of our civil liberties have been taken away, the government using technology to listen in to phone call conversations and to view videos that have been taken from webcams that are set up in public places, we are safer than we were years ago. It's easier to catch and incriminate people when we have proof of what they were doing. Using the Boston Marathon as an example, they used a video camera footage to catch the brothers